Thinking that the regime has the ability to actually commit to a lasting peace is a little bit too much of a fantasy.
Many people around the world think that you are an Israeli asset. Are you?
Yes. I mean, I'm answering for him, but yes, that was Reza Pahlavi, an Iranian monarchist, an exiled son of the former Shah of Iran, who is just real thirsty to be installed as a puppet leader, deferential to the United States and Israel, but it doesn't look like it's going to play out that well for him. Now, he was in Berlin, Germany, hoping to meet with the German government to pressure them to join the US-Israeli fight against Iran. Germany's government was unwilling to take that meeting. To which I say, finally, really. Because look, the Holocaust and the previous crimes that were carried out by the Nazi regime, I think have made Germany very, very sensitive to any issue involving Israel, and they've been very deferential to Israel. However, I think they're finally getting to a point where I think we might be on the wrong side of history again, and you are. So don't join this war, it's a really bad idea. Now, Pahlavi was rejected, but he did hold a press conference that contained moments worthy of discussion. Now, this wasn't part of the press conference, he was outdoors, but this is also worthy of watching because for all that we hear about how much Pahlavi is loved, he wasn't really welcomed by some in Berlin. Take a look. All right, so that was tomato sauce. Some people argued it was red paint. That didn't look like red paint. But police did say that the suspect was immediately arrested. Okay, so not a welcome, reception there. But what did he have to say during his press conference? Actually, more importantly, what type of questions did the journalists who attended the press conference ask, and how did he answer? And I gotta say, some of these journalists did a really great job. So there was this banger question about Pahlavi's recent attempts to rewrite history and claim that he never called for military intervention in Iran. We showed you that video. He made the statement on French television and he got called out about it. Let's take a look.
In a French TV show, you recently said that you never argued for military intervention in Iran, but on the 10th of February, you clearly stated in an interview with Glenn Beck that only a foreign military intervention could neutralize the apparatus of repression in Iran, and only that can be the solution. Do you feel responsible for the many innocent Iranians who have died to the US and Israeli bombs, may I say illegal bombing that you supported?
So I had to just kind of distill that, separate the question out as a separate video, because that was a fantastic question. That is the question I would have asked if I were part of the press pool at this press conference. So I don't know the name of the journalist who asked it. I just wanted to give her a world of credit because it is important to not allow individuals who called for the pain and suffering, for the bombing of a country, to then turn around and launder their reputation, rewrite history, and make it seem as though, no, I never called for war. Now, he was caught here, so he had no choice but to admit the truth, but he had to put a positive spin on it, or at least attempt to. Let's take a look.
The targeting of the regime's infrastructure and its elements of coercion was absolutely something that the Iranian people actually called for. They were asking, they were in fact insisting that come and help us. Based on what President Trump had said at the time, that if the regime hits the people, they will see a very harsh response. The air cover campaign that included hitting the regime infrastructure and apparatus of repression was a necessary step to equalize the playing fields for Iranians that were getting massacred on the streets. We have every right to tell the world when we are being shot on the streets, how else are we supposed to protect ourselves? We can't do it by ourselves. In fact, that was in the interest of protecting more lives from getting lost. Because the more the regime has a means to suppress people, the more casualties we will face. This is something that, in fact, limits the casualties as opposed to add to the casualties. And no one likes to see civilian casualties. Of course I don't. Of course we ache for anybody that has been collateral damage.
What exactly did he mean by we're getting shot at by the regime? We're getting killed by the regime. Homeboy, you live in Washington, D.C. You haven't stepped foot in Iran since 1979. Last time you were in Iran, you were 19 years old. What are you even talking about? You're enjoying the comforts and the privilege of living in America in safety as you called for military intervention against Iran. What do you think military intervention means? When you make a deal with the devil and you go to Israel and you talk about how much you love them, you haven't seen the way they carry out warfare? You were under the assumption that the US and the Israelis were gonna do targeted strikes? That's what you thought? You didn't think that. You're not a moron. I mean, maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know. But he knew what he was doing. And now, I don't know if he regrets it, but I'm sure he's getting a lot of backlash for it. So for instance, he says that the Iranian people asked for it. I'm willing to believe that if you show me evidence of it. What percentage of the Iranian people said they wanted the United States and Israel to bomb their country? Tell me. What's the citation? I'm just supposed to believe the guy who's like thirsting to be installed as the dictator of the country that he just called for the US and Israel to bomb? We're just supposed to believe him? Do I look stupid? Do I look like Elika Laban? And calling dead Iranian civilians collateral damage sure demonstrates how much he values their lives, am I right? But this attitude is common among Iranian monarchists. And I want to make that distinction because the Iranian monarchists do not represent the entirety, not even close, of the Iranian diaspora. So Canadian author Yves Engler, actually, you know what? Before we go to that, there's one other video I want to go to. I want to go to C5 because I want to show you what goes through the minds. Do we have that video, C5? I want to show you guys what goes through the minds of the Iranian monarchists, right? So these are members of the Iranian diaspora. You'll see them out on the streets protesting. They love Reza Pahlavi. And it really does seem, based on their behavior, that they have complete disregard for the actual Iranian people living in Iran. And then there's this guy who kind of messed up a little bit, right? Because he said the quiet part out loud. Now, pay attention to the big contradiction in his statements here, but also the brazen disregard for human lives. Take a look.
Why do you have a US flag?
Because they are supporting us to get rid of the mullahs. IRGC, they are killing Iranian people. US and Israel, they are helping us to get rid of them.
So do you want...
Without US and Israel, we couldn't do anything. They would kill us all. 90 million people.
Do you support Trump's call to wipe out Iranian civilization?
100%.
You support Trump's call to wipe out Iranian civilization?
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Sorry, just straight. Can you say that once?
So maybe Reza Pahlavi isn't stupid. Maybe he knew that a lot of Iranian civilians were going to get killed. And much like the monarchist you just saw in that video, wiping out 90 million people, who cares? I support it. So the gentleman who did that interview is Canadian author Yves Engler. And I want to give him credit. Please follow his work because he asked a really important question that gives us a peek into the thinking of these monarchists. And I think it's important for us to know about that. So let's get back to Pahlavi because his exchange with the reporter in regard to his contradictions about military intervention in Iran, important to focus on. He didn't answer the question, right? So she decided to follow up, and he did not like that.
Even today, as I speak to you, you're shifting back to a mode of appeasement.
Again,
I think you should
French
be
TV,
apologizing to the people of Iran for appeasing the regime as opposed to having their back. I'm here to tell you, we are asking you this time to support the Iranian people. And we're not going to apologize for that demand because I think the Iranian people deserve your support. And I told you, we will fight the fight regardless of whether you help us or not. But let that be on your conscience.
Again, on French TV,
I think you asked too many questions.
No, I can ask one more question. That's my right. Again, on French TV, you clearly stated or you denied the fact that you supported military intervention. And
yes,
now,
I do. I did.
And
of course I did.
You denied the fact.
I just told you the reason.
Can you please let me ask my question? You denied the fact that you support military intervention. Now, again, you legitimize the military intervention. I have another question. Your wife has in the past shared a post with a poster that says "Death to the Left." Do you distance yourself from this sentiment? Is that according to your own values?
Ooh. First of all, you don't get to decide whether a journalist is asking too many questions. But aside from that, didn't know that about his wife. Certainly didn't know that about his wife. Now, he made excuses for his wife. Her name's Yasmin, claiming that she was heckled by protesters in France during the Women, Life, Freedom marches last year. But her death to leftist post was on social media. So you shouldn't be calling for death toward anybody, especially as someone who's seeking to be a puppet leader of a sovereign country who's gonna bring forth democracy. Get out of here, please. Finally, Pahlavi was asked about something that we all know to be true. Let's watch.
We can see outside that you're here with the help of the lobby group Europe-Israel Press Association. The Israeli government supports you taking over in Iran, and the same government, that's the same government that started a war of aggression against your country with the US. So many people around the world think that you are an Israeli asset. Are you?
Of course not. But I'm a friend to Israel and the Jews. Iranians and Jews have a biblical relationship. In fact, the only two countries that can claim that. In modern history, Iran wasn't the only country in the Middle East that harbored Jews that were escaping Hitler and his regime and were given refuge in Iran. That's part of our history. That's part of our tradition of harboring persecuted people. Jews in Iran were free to practice their faith before the revolution.
Jews in Iran are free to practice their faith today. How do I know that? Because Israel bombed a synagogue. This wasn't some underground basement, where Jews were secretly gathering to secretly practice their faith. It was a literal synagogue. There are Armenian churches in Iran where Armenian Christians practice their faith. So let's get back to that synagogue that was bombed in Iran and destroyed, by the way, just totally leveled. Let's talk about that. An Israeli airstrike had completely destroyed the Rafinia synagogue in central Tehran. The Israeli army described the destruction as collateral damage from a strike targeting a commander. But members of the Jewish community expressed anger and outrage. Really, there was an Iranian commander hiding out in the Jewish synagogue? Is anyone really going to believe it? And then they call it collateral damage. Is anyone really deluding themselves into thinking Israel gives a damn about anyone, including Jewish people, if they don't believe in Zionism? Homayoun Sameh, a member of parliament and the head of the Jewish Association of Iran. Yeah, you heard that right. They have something in Iran called the Jewish Association of Iran. In fact, Iran has the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East, second to Israel, of course. Here's what Homayoun Sameh had to say. We condemn this attack. It disrespects our faith. Iran's Jewish community doesn't have good relations with the Zionist Israeli government. Clearly. because Israel was willing to bomb a synagogue and use the same pathetic lie and excuse that they use for the hospitals they bomb in other countries in Palestinian territory. Oh, there was one terrorist there. There was a commander. Sure there was.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.